How are you?
What's that?
I was just wondering, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Grand.
I have never been to Berlin. I would spend 4 years in Germany, but it must be about what, 4 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Where have you been in Germany?
Well, I was there before the end of the Cold War, so I spent all of my time in what used to be West Germany, and never got over to Berlin. But I was stationed in Aschaffenburg for a while, and then I traveled mostly from there.
But it was around 61, wasn't it?
61? No, 84 to 88, approximately.
No, because I checked up on your Facebook that a colleague of yours who was sent to Berlin was.
Oh, that was my dad.
Oh.
And he was the same name. Yeah.
Um. Did he tell you a lot about the time in Berlin?
No, I've always been fascinated by it.
Why did you join the army?
Why? Kind of my dad.
Were you excited?
It was hard. I mean, I was a little, everybody gets a little scared because it's going to be a change of life. But I wasn't really scared, no. And I ended up doing 33 years. So I enjoyed it, most of it.
Were you aware what is gonna come upon you whilst training, or did you have a clue? Did you read about war growing up? I mean, I guess I reckon you spent your time around veterans, and or were you impressed, or were you scared in training, or shocked?
Well, it depends on what kind of training. I mean, certainly, the chemical training is scary, and it's hard. It's one of the hardest things an Army soldier does. So that was that. Hey, first of all, I just want to mention that I love Germany. I mean, that's where my ancestry is, and I would love to go back. I haven't been there in a long time now, but I just love Germany. Anyway.
Yeah. So I love to live in a city that had a wall too.
Yes.
And what exactly is chemical training? What do you mean? Does a regular army soldier go through chemical training?
Yes. Everybody goes through a level of chemical training, so we're able to survive in a toxic environment. And that is what this documentary is about, basically. It's about our preparedness, our readiness regarding being exposed to toxic exposures.
Tell me more about it.
Well, we have, there has always been some thought out there amongst the media and soldiers who are sick from Desert Storm that maybe we were exposed to toxins that we didn't even know about and we weren't really prepared to be part of, or live in that environment. But we couldn't prove it. So the documentary has waited the 25 years it takes to declassify documents, so we can now see a lot of documents that we couldn't see before. And we have found a lot of very interesting documents that pinpoint why we were exposed to toxins, and whether it was done knowingly or was it an accident. But we're starting to put that all together right now in the documentary.
That's exciting. I read up that before you went to Desert Storm, or in Afghanistan as well, that the Gulf War syndrome can be probably caused by vaccinations you get for certain fevers, or even for burn pits.
Yes, burn pit's a new thing. Burn pits generally are a product of the most recent Iraq war and the Afghanistan war, and not necessarily Desert Storm, Desert Shield. We didn't have very large burn pits that burn toxins back in Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Of course, I deployed again, you know, in 80 or in 05 and 06 and 07. So I was exposed to the burn pits too, but I don't have any information about burn pits. But let me give you a list of the toxins that we think that we were exposed to and we're working on in the documentary. The first is the vaccinations. We were given vaccinations that were not approved by the FDA as far as we know, including anthrax, botulism, and a couple more that are more benign. We don't really know exactly what the anthrax and the botulism vaccinations were all about, except that we certainly would have been exposed to anthrax. I'm not certain about botulism. Then we were given pre-nerve agent treatment in the form of a pill called the PB tablet, progestamide bromide. And we were to take that for about 21 days prior to the air war. And then, of course, we were exposed to pesticides that the Iraqis had used that we don't really know a whole lot about. And then we may have been exposed to sarin gas, either deployed by Iraq in 90 and 91, or accidentally, we did blow up a few chemical munitions depots, and we may have been exposed inadvertently to the destruction of those chemical munitions depots. Almost the entire force that was there may have been exposed. So those are the big ones we're looking at. There may be other ones that we're going to come across, but I think that we are kind of maxed out on the number of problems that we're trying to. Maybe I can make sense out of it by saying that we're concentrating on everything and focusing on nothing right now. We're really scattered. But there's a lot going on.
What do you mean by this?
By the focusing on nothing, that comment. It's just kind of a way to say that we have a lot of information and we're trying to get it narrowed down so we can fit it into what appears to be going to be 2 one-hour documentaries.
So how long are you working on this documentary?
Well, we've been working on it through the COVID period, so it's been very tough. We haven't been able to do any in-person interviews or something like that. As soon as we're able to do that, we will really pick up pace. I'm sorry, I'm using my hands.
Never.
Right now, we're still in what would be called pre-interviewing, although we have the interviews all lined up. We are still gathering documentation. We have an outline of the documentary. I forgot what your question was exactly.
Mr. Zirath, maybe it's the best to start at the beginning. I wanted to ask, how come, what did they tell you, what vaccinations they gave? Can you remember? I guess the combat medics and the staff didn't go up to you and say, now I'm going to vaccinate you with anthrax.
Well, actually, it might have been very close to that. The medic of which I supervised, I was a medical service corps officer, would come up to you and say, we need to give you a vaccination today, and we're not going to be able to tell you what it is, but we're going to write it down in your shot record as number 2 or number 1. Literally, it was that bad.
How come you didn't say,
No.
why are you vaccinating with something you don't know?
Because we were soldiers and we were doing what we were, supposed to do. And we had a duty, we thought, and we really thought that there was an operational necessity for the things that they gave us. In other words, if they gave us anthrax, They must have been very concerned about us being exposed to anthrax. We trusted that. We may have made a mistake as soldiers.
How old when you entered the army?
19. I was 19, and then Desert Storm was when I was 30.
How was your training?
Okay, the training was okay. I think everything, and this is what we're concentrating in the documentary. We believe the training and readiness of the individual soldier was really good, except for chemical exposures. We think that we may have been lacking both training and equipment and enough training to work comfortably in a toxic environment. That's what this documentary is focusing on. So let me go a little bit further. We think that there may have been some comments made at the national security level, in other words, at the president's level, and the national security advisors. There may have been some comments made by them that made us look like we were more prepared than we really were. That's a smoking gun. You know what I mean by that?
Do you come to this conclusion?
Well, certainly experience. We have done a lot of questioning veterans. I've questioned veterans on Facebook. It's a great resource for something like that, asking about their readiness. A lot of them are apprehensive to talk about whether they personally were ready for NBC, but most of them have come back. I mean, nearly 100%, and I'm talking about hundreds of responses, have come back and said that they didn't think their unit was ready for a chemical or toxic environment. So that's how we've come to that conclusion, mostly by questioning veterans. Oh, and then we also have a source that used to be a CIA intelligence analyst, and he's confirming the same thing.
Mr. Zirath, you're a captain?
At Desert Storm, I was a captain. I retired a colonel, lieutenant colonel.
Infantry?
No, I was a medical service corps officer. I commanded a hospital.
Okay. Can you tell me about your deployment in Iraq?
Desert Storm, or you're talking about in 05?
Desert Storm, when you were there.
I commanded the 13th Evacuation Hospital. We deployed in November to a pre-deployment site. We trained. We left at the end of December of 1990, and then we stayed in the desert until about June 1st of 91. We set up the hospital about 20 kilometers south of Iraq, and then we treated mostly enemy prisoners of war, about 7,000 of them. We lived in tents, and it was a very austere environment. That's what I guess that's what I can say about it.
What do you mean? How big was your platoon, and what did it take to build up?
The unit is huge. The unit is a 400-bed hospital, and it's all under tent, basically. There are some hard shelters. Like the operating rooms are hard shelters, and a couple other pieces of the hospital. 470 people were in my command. So it's a large unit. It's probably the largest unit in the Army.
How long does it take up to build a hospital, a field hospital?
That's a great question. If you're trained, and we were very well trained for that aspect, you could do it in about 5 days, set the whole thing up. So about 5 days. It's big. I wish I could show you a picture.
So how well were you equipped there? Did you have chemical suits or respirators?
Yes, we had, okay, we deployed as an individual. You deploy with a chemical mask, a suit, a head garment that's plastic, and boots that are chemically resistant. And then you have the test equipment that we went with. So we had all of that. There is some concerns that, not talking about my unit, but I've received a lot of information back through Facebook, through these questionnaires that I sent out, that a lot of people in their gas mask had training filters and not operational filters, which is a definite concern, because training filters don't stop anything except tear gas.
Why?
That's a good question. I think that at the time of the war, we did it so fast that the national stockpile of operational filters had not built up enough. So we were left out there in a chemical environment, maybe with the wrong kind of filters.
How can you, be in combat wearing those suits? So
It's
all day long.
it's awful. It's really, really hard. When you have the full suit on, it's called MOP 4, mission-oriented protective posture. That's gloves, masks, suit, boots. It's hard to do your job. A lot of people have responded to my question saying that they felt that they could do their job, but there was two problems. One is there was no exchange of filters, no plan to change the filter in the mask, and that once the suit was exposed to, let's say, sarin gas, it was supposed to be swapped out after 24 hours. We did not have extra suits. This is shocking information, I know. I think this documentary is going to be very raw. It's going to cause some problems.
Well, the Gulf War syndrome is a known syndrome since years.
Yes, years, yes. I think it was finally I think it was, although we don't refer to it as Gulf War syndrome, we're going to try to keep away from that name, because it's really a combination of symptoms that make up this syndrome, as we want to call it. The chronic fatigue, the fibromyalgia, the immunodeficiency disorders, and a few other things are popping up. Like any neurological issue is being seen in Desert Storm veterans at about 30 to 35% higher than the average public. 35% higher. For example, ALS is a huge problem among Desert Storm veterans. 35% higher than the normal public. I don't understand. I don't know what your question was that I started talking about that, but that's important information, we think.
How long was your deployment?
We got there in December, and we were out of the desert on June 1st. So we were only there 6 or 7 months, but it's a horrible 7 months. When you live in the middle of that desert under a tent, it's not any fun.
Did you go out and were you under attack as well personally?
Yes, when we were, when most of the time that we were under attack was when we were back in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, getting our equipment ready to go up into the desert. We experienced maybe 20 Scud attacks during that time. After we got into the desert, we had no attacks.
How long did the journey take? Every day, or how long?
Training? You train every day?
No, from the desert into the hospital.
I'm still not understanding. We spent about 3 weeks down in the port area of Dhahran, and then we moved up, set up the hospital, and performed duty. Well, there's a complication there, but it's we were scheduled to go to Kurdistan, so we packed up our hospital on about April 1st, and we're prepared to go to Kurdistan by air, but then they canceled that mission. So, you know, I don't know if that clarifies anything. But we were training every day, and we were treating prisoners of war every day.
What do you mean? How can you in a field hospital? How can you train?
Well, training, I mean, in a field hospital, it's complicated because you're training on your medical skills at the same time as you're training on your combat skills. So when the soldiers were working in the hospital, they couldn't really train on combat skills, but they were supposed to constantly have their equipment with them. They didn't always do that. And then the people who don't work in the hospital could train pretty much all the time, but they were busy doing their job too. I mean, we had a laundry, we had a bath system, we had water distribution system. The hospital is just huge. I mean, you said you saw a picture of it. You know what I mean? It's a very large thing that has a lot of people doing a lot of things.
Did the US have guest workers from other countries?
No, we didn't have that, except for a few interpreters. That was all we had, because we needed the interpreters to do the patient work for the enemy prisoners of war. We had to hear where they were feeling their pain and where, you know, that kind of thing. So we had some interpreters, but that's all. Now, some of the hospital was delivered by truck drivers who were third country nationals. But that was only like 1 or 2 days that they were in and out.
From where were they? From Germany or
Pakistan? They were from Pakistan, most of them.
and oh, now I'm a bit field hospital. What kind of injuries did you have to treat on a daily basis?
We treated everything from a minor cold to severe injuries, combat injuries, and that was mostly enemy prisoners of war. We only saw about 15 or 20 American injuries, and they were kind of brought to us by accident. Because we were the nearest hospital, they would fly them in, you know, immediately and try to get help for them. And of course we, you know, did it right away, but then we would move them to the other hospital that was supposed to be doing Americans.
How is it, what happens to prisoners of war in Iraq?
Yes.
So
when they were brought in by helicopter, we just took them in, and we had to secure them ourselves, but they weren't in any good enough shape to do any damage to us. You know, I mean, I had 230 soldiers carrying M16s, and I carried a pistol and that kind of thing, but they were hurt pretty bad. Now, occasionally, the enemy prisoner of war camp that was about 30 miles to our east would ship us sick call enemy prisoners of war, but they would guard them on the way there. That would be anything from dental to a common cold. I mean, you know, we treated a lot of teeth of Iraqi soldiers because we had 6 dentists who needed work. They needed to do their job, and we treated a lot of teeth.
And how is did you in your training, did you ever hear about PTSD, or did you have psychologists?
Well, certainly, yeah. Well, in our hospital, we had psychiatrists and psychologists. And yes, that was always a concern, PTSD. We certainly had heard about it. We certainly were trained a little bit in recognition of it and things like that because of Vietnam veterans. You know, we're very familiar with Vietnam veterans and the PTSD that they experienced. I think our PTSD that we experience or we might have is probably the result of incidents as opposed to the full combat experience. So if you were like right underneath a Scud missile going off or something like that, I mean, soldiers could experience some problems with that. But I don't think Desert Storm veterans have a lot of problems with PTSD. We're seeing it a lot now in the soldiers from the most recent Gulf War and Afghanistan, because they were in long-term combat.
Do you suffer from or do you have Gulf War syndromes yourself?
But yeah, I think I suffer from a little bit of fibromyalgia. I think it's never been diagnosed, and I have chronic fatigue syndrome as a result of the fibromyalgia. But I don't have much. I was when I retired at 33 years, I was given a what's called a 40% disability, so 10% for hearing, 10% for this, 10%, just minor things. I certainly was in the wrong place at the wrong time a few times, but I never got a serious injury.
When did you realize or did come to the conclusion that this might have been directly from Gulf War?
Well, that's a good question, because soldiers right now, even 30 years later from Desert Storm, are still having trouble filing for compensation from the VA because of that exact reason. They need a nexus to the combat situation. It has to be service related. It's hard to prove that stuff, and it's always on the soldier to prove it, as opposed to we have the VA system in America, the Veterans Administration, and they're the ones that provide compensation if you can prove those things. Excuse me. It's very difficult. Now, I will tell you that there is not a veteran out there that has some sort of issue that wouldn't rather be fixed than get compensation. It's about feeling better. It's not about getting a couple dollars from the government.
Where else were you deployed?
Well, during the 05 and 06, I deployed to Kuwait. I traveled a lot. I had a pretty high level job, and I traveled to Iraq, Afghanistan, a couple other places I guess I'd prefer not to talk about.
In a security or?
I was doing multinational logistics. I was providing support to countries that were helping us fight the war, including Germany.
And doing your training leading ahead to the Iraq War, did you train with other nations?
Yes, all the time. Slovakia, the Spanish, of course, the Brits, who are in the Australians, a couple other countries. I was always with them, providing them support.
Did you undergo the same chemical training than them?
No, because we had different equipment. They had better equipment. So we were, in 05 and 06 and 07, during the most recent Iraq War, there was less of a concern about chemical warfare. It was Desert Storm and Desert Shield that we were really worried about. So I don't think I put on a chemical suit once during, the other 3 years that I spent over there. Just Desert Storm.
In Desert Storm, did you were with the other countries you trained with in constant contact?
Yes, yeah, because we were in, all the countries were together as a coalition, and it's been that way. That's the way we fight wars nowadays. It's a coalition. There's a commander, usually an American, who is in charge of all of these other countries too. So
but they weren't stationed with you in the same platoon.
no, they were operating separately. Yeah, but right alongside.
You would, it were coordinated actions all the time. You would
Yes,
know what the Brits were doing or the Norwegians.
right. Hopefully you knew what they were doing. Yes. There is a piece of equipment that's called the Blue Force Tracker that is given to our preferred coalition partners, so we can see where all of their vehicles are and what they're doing. So that piece of equipment is very important to make sure we don't. Go ahead.
That was already in work during Desert Storm.
Blue Force Tracker, no. That was something we developed after that.
Okay, and how did you do this then in Desert Storm?
Radio. That's the way they fight now has changed to more teletype situations. They don't use radio communications very often anymore, except at the lower level. Most of it is done by, a teletype system or a computer system called SIPRNet, which is a secure system. So that's how we do
it. So are you collaborating for the documentary with those nations?
No, we're not. But I have a feeling though that they're just like you. There's going to be a lot of interest. This documentary is going to bring up a lot of issues because we know that soldiers from Britain experienced the same thing we did. That's just an example.
Yeah, I did interview a few.
You did.
Did you see or read some of the interviews I did so far?
No, I'd like to.
I did interview Colonel Matt Jackson.
Yeah.
He's from Florida. He was in Desert Storm as well. And Martin Webster from the HM forces. And another British Army veteran who did experience those toxins.
Are they experiencing medical difficulties?
Yes. Colonel Jackson, not.
Okay.
He's a Vietnam veteran as
well.
Oh, wow. And so I have an international audience.
Yes, I'd say.
And so that'd be interesting to tell maybe more details for the other veterans to know at what date and situation are crucial for this documentary or
I think it's going to be very one-sided. I think it's going to be us, the documentary staff, who's very capable, putting together the details and then putting it out in 2 one-hour documentaries on Fox News. And from there, we've been told that there could be follow-ups. So we'll get some response from other people and then maybe do some follow-up documentaries. I don't know. I can't say much about it because it's all kind of still in the secret mode.
Okay.
Like I can't tell you about, at least I would not feel comfortable, although I did talk to the producer this morning. We have got some really good stuff that pinpoints who may have not told the entire truth about sending us to that war. But I'm not going to talk anymore about that. That's going to be in the documentary.
Why did after 3 years of Iraq war, what situations were the worst? Or I mean that's a long time in deployment. I mean,
Yeah,
some people look MASH and it's just like
yeah.
it's
Well,
every
I
day.
haven't always been lucky about the positions I've had at the time these wars pop up. So, I mean, not everybody deployed for that long. I was very unusual. I had a very highly technical job working with the coalition forces, and there were very few people trained to do what I did, because they have to understand some U.S. law, the Arms and Export Act, and things like that. And a lot of people don't want to do that because it's boring, but I did it. I got trained in that, and then I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's why I had the long deployments.
How long vacation did you have between the deployments?
Each year you get a 2-week leave, and then you get a couple weekends off. But I was traveling all the time, and I was in London and Belgium, and so I didn't really feel like I needed a big vacation, but I wanted to get the job done.
What job?
Okay, so I was providing support to coalition forces, both equipment and training, and to make them better able to meld into the U.S. Army war. So I would make sure that they had the right equipment and the right training to be able to do that. Here's an example. Slovakia had volunteered to come to the war while I was deployed there, but they wanted to do route clearing, which is one of the most dangerous jobs you can do in a war, because it means you're driving the roads and blowing up mines. Okay, they wanted to do that mission. No American unit volunteered to do that mission. So I had to try to figure out what they needed in order to be able to do that mission safely. We ended up giving them armored Humvees, certain type of radio systems that their radio wouldn't set the mine off, because some of them are controlled by radio signal. And we gave them Blue Force Tracker, so they knew where we were and we knew where they were. That was a huge mission, and I had to get permission from Donald Rumsfeld himself in order to do that, because it was a violation of Title 21. So I have a letter from Rumsfeld stating I could give them armored Humvees.
Okay, why is that a violation?
Because in Title 21, the Arms and Export Act, U.S. technology cannot be given, especially armored vehicles, and the type of armor we put on our vehicles cannot be given to a foreign country unless they're a preferred ally, which is only 3, and that's Germany, Britain, and Australia. You 3 countries are allowed to have anything we have, but not Slovakia.
I did interview now 2 combat nurses, a German one and a US American. And the US American was not satisfied with the hospital equipment in Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah. I'm shocked by that, because my hospital that I supervised, we had a lot of good equipment, but I don't know what they fell in Afghanistan. Did they actually backfill into an American hospital, or?
No, he said that he was in camp warehouse close to really an old American built up hospital that was actually a hut.
Oh, wow. That's not good, but I don't know anything about that. That's interesting.
And I think in Germany, the veterans would like to have now their own drones, so
Yes.
they don't rely on American support so much.
Drones are, you guys, the Germans could probably make the best drones in the world, but I know that we secure that technology pretty well. That so I don't know exactly how we would fix that. The Arms Export Act would prevent the provision of drone technology to anybody until it might take up to 25 years because it has to become declassified. It's hard to explain sometimes, all the revolving, intersecting laws that prevent those kind of provisions.
How in your in Iraq, were you satisfied with the communication between the countries?
Yeah, I mean, they knew who to come to, they would come to me if they needed anything. Most of them had a cell in our compound. We would call it, what did we call that? There was an area of our compound where you had all of the foreign government representatives, and we had a word for it. It was like Epcot Center or something like that. Like if you go to the Epcot Center in Florida, they have all these countries. We had that in our thing, and we would do face to face every day. So I knew what they needed. I wasn't always able to provide it, but
so that you'd have officers or of the colored nations in.
yeah, it was trailers, and they all had their flag up. I wish I had a picture of it, but
And and you say you overall satisfied with with the outcome of Desert Storm or the mission?
Well, Desert Storm, oh, how could you not be? I mean, it didn't take very long, it was well coordinated in that, but the problem we're looking at now 30 years later is, were we ready to fight a toxic war? And that I think we can safely say now, with the information that we've gathered in the documentary, we were not ready for a toxic war. And that's why everybody is sick.
Tell me about your second deployment in Iraq. Did you already feel weird or funky?
Oh, it was fascinating to get back because during Desert Storm, I never crossed into Iraq. So to get to Baghdad was fascinating for me, to see that. And I traveled from Camp Victory out at the airport down to the Green Zone, down at the embassy area. Every day that I was there, we traveled by helicopter from Camp Victory, which is out at what we call the BIAP, which is Baghdad International Airport, down to, I don't want to use too many terms because I know that it gets confusing, and then I think everybody is aware of the term the Green Zone, which is the area downtown where Saddam's Republican Palace was, that was turned into a huge camp where most of the negotiations happened and all that kind of thing. That's where I had an office down there.
Yeah, I got told that. No, you can, it's good to use those words. I have veterans in my, and it's interesting for for citizens as well, I guess, and important maybe to know Uh,
Those terms, yeah.
yeah, to
One thing that I might talk about for just a second is, because you wouldn't know to ask me about this, but one of the big missions that I had was to try and bring the United Nations back into Baghdad. That was quite a project. It was called UNAMI, the United Nations Iraq Mission. Oh my goodness, I don't even remember what UNAMI stands for. But what happened early in the war in 2003 was the United Nations was bombed, blown up, completely blown up. They lost the Secretary General and a bunch of people who were very important. So we had spent certain parts of the American government wanted to get the UN back into Baghdad to do their humanitarian work. And I worked really hard on that project. I didn't make much ground, but we did get to the point by the time I left that we had UN personnel in the green zone trying to work on projects. So it was somewhat of a success, but I don't know how long it took for the UN to get a full setup there. I don't really know because I had left.
what exactly do you mean? How to work? Were you just pleading with the UN on the
Yes,
telephone, or?
that is exactly it. When I talk about it being hard work, it's about pleading with people to provide what we needed to have done. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So, how was Baghdad then? How did it look like?
What? I'm sorry, what?
How did Baghdad look like by then?
Baghdad?
Yeah.
Oh, it was a mess because I went through both the insurgency part of it. I was there, and then also the surge that we sent, the 2 infantry divisions back in there to kind of quell the insurgency. It was a mess. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go to a local store and buy a falafel. I mean, you just couldn't do that. You had to stay on our base because it was dangerous.
And you were then not a combat medic anymore.
I was still a medical service corps officer, but I was doing logistics work.
And you were all the time in weaponized, and you did
Yeah.
you ever go and get sent out on patrols?
No, I was a lieutenant colonel at the time, and lieutenant colonels don't go on patrols very often. Accidentally, maybe, but no, I was never sent out to do anything like that.
So what was your daily duty there?
Sitting at a computer like this, sending emails, pleading for stuff, like you had said, pleading is a good word. Keeping my boss informed as what we're doing. I had about a 30-man team that worked for me that constantly were getting equipment, putting equipment into the hands of the coalition. That's what we did every day. It was every day. It was something different.
I heard that troops were sent into the old Baghdad palace for holidays or vacation from other camps.
Yeah, I think that was probably true. I mean, both the green zone, not so much because there was so much activity down in the green zone, but certainly the palace that was out at the Baghdad International Airport. I forget the name of that palace. That was like Saddam's main palace out there. A lot of troops would come into there just for rest because it was relatively safe. It wasn't really relatively safe. I mean, there was mortar and you could hear gunshots all the time. So I don't know why they would. It certainly would be better than being out in Basra or Fallujah or Mosul or any of those places that were always under the insurgency.
That was while the CENTCOM.
CENTCOM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where you were a coalition as well with the French a lot?
I didn't have much dealings with the French. As a matter of fact, I don't remember I don't remember the French being there. I could be wrong. I don't know.
12th Airborne Corps and the 1st Cavalry Division,
They were, huh?
the Marine Division, and the Arab and the British and the French forces.
French forces. I tell you what, when you say French forces, I wonder if it wasn't just a couple guys. I don't know. I don't remember ever providing anything to the French.
Okay. And you, what was the worst deployment that or had the most impact on you?
Oh, wow, that I don't know. Well, I don't know. I had good jobs. I mean, I enjoyed, I mean, it wasn't fun, but we had, the Desert Storm was, I had a great unit. The people had fun when they were off duty, and they were very well trained at their medical mission and stuff like that. That was the best deployment. The Baghdad or Kuwait deployment. Kuwait is a horrible, ugly place. That's probably the worst part of the whole thing is, you know,
Why?
spending. Kuwait is it's just not a pretty place to be. It's just all dark. It's all desert sand, and Baghdad is actually kind of pretty, but Kuwait City is not. I can't explain it. Didn't like it there.
How
I
did
always did my best to get out of there. I wanted to get out of Kuwait.
how do you party in a war zone?
How do you what?
How do you party in a war zone?
You don't. There's no alcohol allowed, but you know, the soldiers still had fun. Now the Australians had beer, always. The Germans had beer, always, but Americans were not allowed to drink.
But they didn't invite you to their parties.
I was invited all the time. I never said yes.
Mm-hmm. And is it do you have do American soldiers in deployment get medication for PTSD?
I think once, I can't say for certain because I've been retired for 9 years now, but I'm pretty sure that when you are officially diagnosed with PTSD, you can no longer serve. I could be wrong about that, as long as it's medicated and under control. But yeah, they get medications. Yeah, definitely. They get it through the,
Painkillers and
well, that one's kind of gone by the wayside. I think for a while they were, but you know, that's very controversial now.
because you would feel funky or strange. What made you join? Did you join this documentary, or did you start to research yourself?
Oh no, that I was doing no research on it. I mean, I followed a few things, but the producer, the head producer of the documentary, actually was a soldier of mine during Desert Storm. She served in my hospital, and now she works in the business, and she does a lot of television work. She actually got a hold of me and asked would I be a military advisor to the documentary, and I said, "Oh, I'll try." Yeah. So that's how this all started for me. Since then, it's been a lot of research.
And when you started researching, were you aware already about failures of the U.S. military by then, or was that kind of shocking?
You know, this is stuff that I've all learned since in the last year. Actually, in the last month, it's gotten very interesting. And the reason, and like I said before, I think earlier, the reason is these documents are all being declassified now. So we're starting to see more. There's still some huge voids in information out there that are still classified. And you're able to, 25 years is the normal classification. There's an executive order signed by, I don't even remember who, might have been way back in Vietnam, that you can keep documents classified past 25 years for 4 reasons. One is there's a person still alive who could be implicated negatively. 2 is that there's technology information that they don't want yet to be put out into the public arena. And now I'm starting to fail me as to what the other 2 reasons are. But the important one is that there's still people alive that could be implicated, and we're running into that with the documentary. We're kind of stalled right now because of that. We're waiting. We've done Freedom of Information Act requests, and we're waiting for documents to be declassified. One of the big ones that I'm working on right now is where the National Security Council and the Command Authority of the United States, all of the meeting minutes are online at the National Security Archives until December 1st of 1990, and then it becomes blank. There are no more records. That's because there are people still alive that were in those meetings. We have to get those documents in order to go forward. Okay, I didn't.
What are you doing? You writing emails?
Yeah, yeah, emails and Freedom of Information requests. Yeah, that's how we do it. Yeah, it's just a letter that the producer puts together, sends forward, tells them we're doing a documentary. It's a very important documentary. We need these declassified. That's all it is.
What was your last mission before you retirement?
I was working with the Wisconsin National Guard in logistics.
And how was your training in Germany?
It was nice. I'd go back there in a second.
Yeah. Did you ever train with German forces?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, they were always there. I mean, we were, in the caserns. There was always German soldiers there. I never had much doing with them.
So what is your overall, looking now back on your military career, what critique do you have towards the military?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard to answer that question. There's a lot of different jobs, a lot of different things that I went through. So I don't know how to I mean, I have a great retirement, so that's a good thing.
And are you happy with the VA?
The VA where I live is the VA hospital is wonderful. I think the VA administration that does the compensation parts needs to be staffed better. They need to be more quicker in response to veterans, because some veterans complain about filing the paperwork for a certain concern they have, and waiting 3 to 5 years even to hear back. Some of them might be dead, and you wonder if part of the VA mission is to kind of wait these people out until they pass away. I don't know. I mean, it's a horrible situation that some of these soldiers go through. I'm not in that situation.
Would you go back being a soldier?
No. I'm too old now.
No, but
would I do it again?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What things can you bring into civilian life what can make your life better?
I don't know. I mean, I learned a lot in the Army about analytical processing and process analysis and things like that. But, and that you use all the time. But I don't know other than that. If that was the question, I don't know quite.
Yeah, strategic thinking, survival, or something like that.
Yeah, critical thinking. Yeah,
Did you have
training.
psychological training as well?
No, I never did. No, and maybe a little bit when I went through my basic and advanced course, but not much.
That's the peer training.
Right.
And why wouldn't you do it again?
I would do it again.
You would do it again.
Yeah.
But
I'm just glad it's over.
great to go into war. Or what's good to be? Why would you want to become and do this job?
Oh, wow, that's such a good question. Oh my goodness. I tell you what, when I was in high school that long ago, I was an anti-militarist. I mean, I really was. I did not believe in war. It was right after the Vietnam War, and nobody liked war. It was a bad time. But at the same time, there was a need to pay for college and do the things I wanted to do. And I certainly wasn't the type that was going to sit at a desk and do work like that. Um, so the Army and my dad, convinced me that maybe I should give it a try. Well, that try ended up 33 years. And I did enjoy it. And I think that I never worked in a position where I would be somebody that would have to kill somebody. I didn't do that. I don't know if I could have done that. But your question is a very good question. I mean, it's a hard job. And I've never liked calling it a job because it's really it's not a job. It's something more than that.
Do you think veterans get a good treatment in the USA in general?
I think they do now. Certainly, I remember the days in the 70s and early 80s when they did not. So we have evolved, I think, as a culture in America to respect veterans. There are always veterans out there making mistakes. Abu Ghraib is a great example of where we made a mistake. Certain soldiers made a mistake. And this country suffers from those kinds of things because we know that people in the world do not like those kind of things when they happen.
I'm trying to be the reporter. I talk to every force.
Yes.
And
we're out there forward doing things that maybe the world doesn't necessarily want us doing. And maybe that's one way to put it. Maybe we should just leave the world alone a while.
What was your mission statement going into Iraq?
The Iraq War? That's a good question. A mission statement? I don't know. I didn't personally have a mission statement. I had a job that was very entertaining and interesting in helping all the coalition forces. And I think I had the best job in the entire Army because I got to work with the foreign coalition on a daily basis. And I had bosses that were very supportive. Mission statement, I would say keep my head down and not get into situations where I would not be able to get out of. For example, I happened to be at the Pentagon on 9/11. I was in a meeting when the airplane hit the building. I've just always have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, I guess.
How was this?
Yeah, that was interesting. I happened to be there, the same job that we're talking about now, that, I was at a meeting where we were going to switch some equipment around. maybe some of it going to foreign countries. And I just happened to be at the Readiness Center in a conference room when somebody came in and said, okay, 2 planes have hit the World Trade Center. Of course, we knew what that meant, that we were under attack. And then we went out of the room, and then the plane hit the Pentagon, but we were on the side of towards the river, so we were pretty far away from where the impact was. It's a big building. It's immense.
I think everybody can remember the moment when they remember 9/11.
Yeah, I was there.
What happened in that situation? How long did it take to get evacuated, and what was your thought about
Well, there's an intercom system in the Pentagon that they started talking on, telling us where we should go and things like that. The lights flickered, but the generators kicked on and stuff like it, if that's what you mean. And then at first they wouldn't let us leave the building, and then they forced us out of the building. And we ended up going to my boss's car and getting out of the parking lot without going near where the impact was. And then we kind of got lost in Washington that day because all the traffic patterns were all changed because they were trying to get people out of Washington. And anyway, that was it. Then that night we came back, and then we went to the parking lot where the impact occurred, and we watched what was going on. So.
And when were you informed about the situation, the whole situation? When did you get your call to go back to base or get called into action?
It wasn't really until 3 days later that we were told where to go and what to report to and what to do. I mean, we stayed at a hotel because we couldn't get anywhere. There were no more planes, planes were shut down. And so we stayed in a hotel for a few days. And then we were told where to go and what to do.
Were you aware or about the situation? What was the meeting about you were in?
The meeting was about the Wisconsin National Guard and the New York National Guard, of all entities, the New York National Guard, who was attacked that day. They were swapping some equipment because one unit was becoming one thing and the other unit was swapping. It was very mundane, boring. And then some of the equipment was being sold to Peru. The equipment that could not be used by either one of those units was being sold to Peru under foreign military sales. That was what our meeting was. It was very boring until somebody came in and told us what happened.
Do you sell weapons under that law to Europe?
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
And what was your initial thought during the on 9/11? Did you already know what was going on?
Yeah, I knew when he came in and said 2 planes had crashed into the World Trade Center. Before my job working with foreign military sales, and that I had worked 7 years in anti-terrorism and security. So I knew right away what it was because I used to teach it all the time. I knew that it was an attack by Al-Qaeda on American soil.
Because they used 2 planes, or 2
it was
planes
obvious.
is
That's a conspiracy.
sign.
When you have 2, it's a conspiracy, right? It's not an accident.
And how long did you undergo counterterrorism training? How long?
I did 7 years of my 33 was doing security and anti-terrorism. That was when I was a much younger man.
And this constant training. And how many foreign languages do you speak?
I'm a non-language learner. When I went to college, I tried to take Russian and I failed miserably. I don't speak any language at all. I can speak a little Korean because I was there for a while, and I can speak a little bit of German.
What happened to the translators, the Iraqi translators?
What happened?
The Iraqi staff and translators you did use in Iraq.
They were really good. I mean, we had translators all the time.
And did you use Iraqi staff on base?
Iraqi stuff?
Yeah. No.
I didn't use too much Iraqi stuff. I wanted to buy some Iraqi stuff, but
Okay, that was
I never ate at the I never ate at the Iraqi restaurants. I always ate at the base, on base. And I did that in Korea too.
what's the difference between the Korean War and the Iraq War?
Well, the Korean War, we've been in a truce for a long time. So the difference is that in Korea, we establish a line of defense, and that line is held for 40, 50 years. But in Iraq, the war was very fluid. There was never really a good line where we separated ourselves. Big difference in how you fight a war. An insurgency like in Iraq is a totally different thing. It's very dangerous.
How was your position in Korea? What did you do there?
I was a medic. That was before I became an officer.
And how was this? Where were you in Korea?
I was up on the DMZ for most of it, the demilitarized zone at Camp Boniface, and then in Yongsan at the 8th Army headquarters.
What happened while you were in Yongsan?
Nothing. I played golf a couple times. That's nothing. It was basically an office job. I drove the commander around. I delivered papers and things like that. I went to Itaewon every day to shop, and so that was nice life. That was a nice tour. I enjoyed Korea a lot.
Did you ever go back?
I did go back in '88, I think, right after Germany. I went back for 3 or 4 months for an exercise. That was.
But what would you do?
What would you do?
Build up you.
Well, I worked in a headquarters unit, tracking pretend patients, if that makes sense. I mean, people would not really we had people who really got injured, and then we would have people who were killed in the exercise. So I would be tracking those patients coming back into the hospitals. It was a medical regulating thing. If that makes, it's hard to explain.
And
every patient has to be tracked. I mean, if you get your thumb stepped on, you become in the medical system of the military, you become a patient and you are evacuated all the way to the States sometimes. We track that. Everybody, we know where everybody is at all times. And that goes for enemy prisoners of war too. I mean, in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, all of those patients were tracked to make sure they recovered.
For how long?
Well, certainly until we left in June. We turned all that stuff over to people there, to Kuwaiti medical services. I don't know what happened after that. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Are you kind of shocked by some of the information I'm telling you, or is this stuff you've all heard before?
I'm very well interested in information. Have you been deployed in Africa?
I spent 1 day in Djibouti.
What did you do there?
Same thing I was doing in Iraq, providing equipment to foreign governments. My purpose of going to Djibouti for a day was to see if there was somewhere, some equipment that they needed. Africa was someplace that has been ignored, for a long time. And we needed to provide some equipment there. I really can't talk a whole lot about that.
And what are the failures of Afghanistan?
The failure was not recognizing that we needed to fight a different kind of war there. I don't want to say too much. It's just an opinion. We never sent enough troops to Afghanistan to really stabilize it. Desert Storm, Desert Shield, we did it the right way. We sent 500,000 troops in. We got it done in 3 months, and then we brought them all home. We didn't do that in Afghanistan.
Yeah, then have a lovely day. I have another interview lined up.
Okay,
And
good.
thank you. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
See you on Facebook.
Keep in touch.
Yeah.